A 16-year-old was found unalived on school property less than 100 yards from her car. It's time to talk true crime, and tonight's case is that of Sarah Yarborough. It's Friday the 13th, December of 1991 in Seattle, Washington. Sarah's parents were going out of town for the weekend for her little brother's soccer game, and Sarah, who's 16 at this point, decides she doesn't want to go and stays home. Her mom doesn't love the idea, but her friend is going to stay with her. Her friend and her have a nice night. They go to the basketball game at Federal Way High School, get some food, and go home. Sarah was a junior in high school at this point at Federal Way High School, and she was just beginning to look at colleges. She wanted to go out of state and become an engineer or a museum curator, and everyone described her as just the fun, loving girl that everyone wanted to be around. Everyone enjoyed her presence. Sarah wakes up Saturday morning the 14th in a panic. She thinks she is late for cheer practice, so she rushes up, gets ready, and heads out the door. She drives down the road to Federal Way High School, and she actually finds out that she arrived early, so she is just waiting in her car. None of her teammates are there yet. Eventually, Sarah's teammates start showing up for cheer practice, and Sarah's car is there, but Sarah is nowhere to be found. So they start looking around for her, calling people. They called the friend that was staying with her, asking where Sarah could be, and nothing. But an hour later, a gruesome discovery was made, and Sarah's body was found less than 100 yards from her car on school property. Drew Miller, who was 13 at the time, had a sleepover with some of his friends, and they wake up in the morning, have some breakfast, and him and another friend decide to go skateboarding at Federal Way High School, just a couple blocks from home. They're playing in the parking lot, breaking ice, going on their skateboards, when they see a man staring at them from the bushes. This obviously creeps them out, but they would go over there after he walks away. He's still within distance of them when they discover Sarah's body. They look up and see the man still standing there staring at them. They bolt home and call 911.
He just stopped because he's standing up in the middle of the bushes at that time in the morning. What's he doing there? It's pretty creepy. And then, for whatever reason, he just walked out of the bushes and started walking the same direction we were.
Authorities get to the scene and discover Sarah's body exactly where the boys said it would be. She had her drill uniform, which had Sarah on it, so it did not take long to identify her. She even had her hot hair curlers still in, which just shattered me. She was just a girl. The authorities immediately believe that this is an SA-motivated attack. She had had some of her undergarments removed and placed next to her, and her nylon stockings were found around her neck. They look in her car, and it didn't look like there were any signs of a struggle. Her breakfast was still sitting on her passenger seat, so they believed that she either knew this person or willingly walked, or they had some kind of mechanism to get her out of her car. They later discovered that she had not been raped, but they did find semen on her underwear and her jacket. They had a full male DNA profile. But back in 1991, DNA testing was not what it is today. They couldn't do much with this at this point. They had eyewitnesses and DNA evidence, everything that should have been needed to catch the killer immediately. But a week would go by, and then years would go by with nothing. Drew Miller, who was only 13 at the time he made the discovery of Sarah, which is heartbreaking in itself, would help authorities create a sketch, which would become very beneficial later in the case. He had made direct eye contact with this man, stared at this man, so this picture was engraved in his head. Her school would host a memorial event for her, and her classmates and her close friends were absolutely heartbroken. They did dedicate a bench to her, which is still there to this day, and her brothers actually do an interview on the 48 Hours episode on this, and they described this time as being really hard, especially seeing that sketch all over the town being a constant reminder of what the person who did this to their sister looked like. Her friends and family are searching through yearbooks and seeing this face on every person that passes them, hoping that they can connect it somehow, but none of them could place who this face belonged to. Over 3,000 tips had come in by the early 2000s, and not one of them would ever mention who ended up doing this. Police were going on nothing. They would input the full male DNA profile into a DNA national database called CODIS, which helps convict criminals through DNA evidence, but there was no hits, so police never gave up despite this. In 2011, the Keene County Sheriff's Office would start using forensic genetic genealogy. Colleen Fitzpatrick helped develop this system, which compares unknown DNA samples to known DNA samples in public databases, kind of like a 23andMe. And this wasn't very well respected back then, but in 2018, it would actually help lead to the Golden State Killer. But in 2011, it was not well respected yet. It wasn't looked at as being very reliable, and it was kind of a joke. But the forensic genetic genealogy testing from Fitzpatrick would help them get a name. She traced family genetics all the way back to a man on the Mayflower named Robert Fuller. So police take this and they can only think of Bill Fuller, which was a close friend to the Yarboroughs, but it wasn't him. Bill was fully cooperative with authorities. He handed over his DNA immediately, answered any questioning. Her family did not believe he had anything to do with this. He was 48 at the time, looked nothing like the sketch. He wasn't in his 20s. He wasn't tall. Nothing added up. The DNA ended up not matching. In 2019, 8 years later, they would have two hits to the DNA. It was Edward and Patrick Nicholas. They were two distant cousins of Bill Fuller. One of the brothers, Edward Nicholas, was a registered SA offender. So they look into him, and his DNA is in CODIS, the national DNA database that they help use to convict people. But they tested against the C-man found on the garments with Sarah, and it's not a match. Now, familial DNA testing was not allowed in Washington at the time, so they start looking at Patrick, his brother. He was 27 at the time, looked like the sketch, and they don't have his DNA. So now they have to find a way to get it. At this point, they are looking into him. He had been divorced, he has no kids, no friends. He's kind of a loner. He worked at an auto parts shop, but he didn't really take a car. He would take the bus. And they find that the bus route he took during the time of Sarah's unaliving went right by her high school. So they have a pretty good idea that this is their guy. So, since familial DNA testing wasn't allowed in Washington, they do undercover surveillance, and he goes to the laundromat and tosses out a cigarette butt. Bullseye. They've got him. The DNA matches, and they arrest him. They've got their guy.
Why do you think you're here?
I have no clue.
We're investigating is the death of a young girl. Her name's Sarah Yarborough.
Where?
Authorities question Nicholas, and he admits nothing. He says, "What year?" when asked about Sarah's unaliving. Come on. So they look into his past, and he has a pretty extensive criminal history. So authorities go and knock on a woman named Ann door. About 4 years before Sarah's unaliving, Ann was hanging out at the Columbia River in Richland, Washington, when a man approaches her and starts striking up a conversation. She gets uncomfortable, says she has to leave, gets in her car, and when she's about to close the door, he grabs it, puts a knife to her throat, and tells her to get out of the car. So they go down to the riverbank, tells her to take her clothes off, and this brave woman runs for her life and calls authorities.
He seemed normal, kind of friendly actually, just friendly. I had asked him if he'd done any water skiing yet because he said he had just moved to town, and he said he couldn't swim. We got about halfway down the bank and he told me to stop. I ran and dove in the river because I was thinking he couldn't swim. Swam as hard as I could.
Swam for your life.
I swam for my life.
This idiot, Patrick, introduced himself to Anne, thinking probably that she wouldn't get away from his grasp. But this brave woman did, and authorities would arrest him a few days later and discover that he had, at this point, 2 convicted SAs and an attempted SA. So she testifies at his trial and asks for him to get the maximum sentence, and he gets 10 years, right? But little did she know, he got out in 3.5. The system absolutely failed in this situation on every single account. He got out in 3.5 years with 3 SA charges on his record, and he never once submitted DNA, so that's why he wasn't in CODIS. Anne had no idea he had gotten out in 3.5 years, and what's even worse is he would have still been in prison on the day that he unalived Sarah if he would have served his full sentence. Come on. Patrick's defense attorney, David Montez, tried to argue that the forensic genetic genealogy should not be allowed because it wasn't fully reliable, but his DNA matched the DNA on Sarah's garments. All of Sarah's clothing that she was wearing on the day she was unalived 30 years ago were shown in court. They pulled it out, and Sarah's friends from high school were in the crowd, and I just can't even imagine what they had to be feeling seeing her belongings again after 30 years. It's so heartbreaking. It only took the jury 1 day to reach a verdict. They found him not guilty of premeditated first-degree unaliving. I can imagine how it felt in court for her friends and family to hear the words "not guilty" read out by the court. But they would find him guilty of first degree and second degree unaliving just without the premeditation. 34 years after Anne was attacked, she showed up to Patrick's sentencing and spoke, and it said he recognized her immediately, and I hope this just shook him to his core. What a brave, amazing woman, and I love that she showed up to advocate for Sarah's justice.
Or see my face or hear my name ever again.
We rely on a system of justice that is designed to protect us from predators like Nicholas, and this system failed me. It failed Sarah, her family, friends, and countless others. I ask the court to please not make the same mistake.
Sarah's friends and family also gave their impact statements at Patrick's sentencing, and she just seemed like an unbelievably amazing woman with such a bright future ahead of her. She was clearly so loved, and I hope she rests in peace. Patrick had essayed 5 women, and it was actually asked of the court to give him extra time for all of his other crimes. They gave him 46 years. Sarah's family and friends had to wait for justice for 30 years while he just got to live his life. I don't think this is right. I think the court system failed in all aspects of this case, between not taking his DNA, not giving him his full sentence. I hate it. I will say that it's pretty amazing that authorities persevered for 30 years to find Sarah's killer and bring some peace to her family. It's also amazing that Colleen Fitzpatrick's technology and advancements helped do this. It's amazing, and I'm pretty impressed because a lot of cases don't get this kind of attention. This case is a great example of how unjust the court can be in this situation. Anne did everything right, and he ended up only serving 3.5 of 10 years, and she wasn't even notified that her attacker was back on the street. Sarah's unaliving was in the time he should have been in prison. It's unbelievable, and just goes to show that these situations are not handled well. I hope the system improves.